thank you so much for being with us today for the first session of the Logic of Coffee Logistics webinar series organized by Digital Coffee Future. We are very happy to host this session, starting from understanding a bit more about the intersection between coffee logistics and digitalization, and therefore kind of where technology comes in. I'm very honored to, I'm very honored to be with you all today, together with Don Lawrence from Intelligentsia Coffee, Colleen Walsh from Olam Specialty Coffee, and Aleksandrs Sidorecs from Cognizant. So just some housekeeping information before we start. You can choose your language, either English or Spanish in the icon. So por favor, escogen su idioma, inglés o español, en el icono más abajo. You have to know that the webinar will be recorded, just for your information. Then we will start with a panel session of 45 minutes, followed by a Q&A session of about 15 minutes. You can use the Q&A tab to ask any questions, also just during the panel discussion. So feel free to include the information there. But please do introduce yourself in the chat. We always want to know who is part of our community, where you're located exactly, if it's morning, afternoon for you. And if you want to share more about what you do in coffee, that's always welcome. Finally, a big thank you to our sponsors who helped us to make this possible. Crop Connects, Savor Brands, Coffee Friend, and Mercon, and also our media partners, Roast Magazine and Barista Magazine. So thank you so much for being here with us. Again, feel free to use the chat. So just to kind of, we'll dive deep into the conversation right away, just to kind of use the time as much as possible. So as I was mentioning, this session will be really focusing a bit on understanding the challenges that we're seeing in the coffee sector when it comes to the logistics space, which unfortunately have been pretty considerable in the last couple of years, but also understanding how technology could come in and potentially be a solution, or also being, why not, a challenge for this current scenario. So let me start with Colleen as the first question. And Colleen, you've been kind of in this area for so many years, and you have a very long expertise when it comes to the logistics scenario. I would like to maybe start with a question to you, if just talking about some regional differences that you're seeing when it comes to the current obstacles that we are kind of facing right now in the supply chain.
Thank you for having me. So the biggest challenges that we're seeing, of course, and everyone's seeing, is getting space on the vessels, getting a booking, and getting containers. And this is, depending on the region, the reasons for it are different. We're seeing these issues all over the world, from, say, Latin America and Africa, where we get a lot of our coffees. It's that the carriers don't prioritize those lanes. So we're not seeing the vessels going there. We're not seeing the vessels that do go there come to the US and call the ports that they used to call. Having said that, they're moving, Asia is, of course, the big moneymaker for the ocean carriers. And so they want to go to Asia because that's where they get all of the consumer goods. But if I were trying to ship coffee out of Asia, we're last on the list there as well. So we're having issues even in places where the carriers do have vessels, because they're wanting to take the high volume, high dollar, Walmart, Costco, those guys above coffee. Coffee's not considered a high value commodity for them, so they're not prioritizing things for us. The other issue is that coffee moves in 20-foot containers.
Otro tema es que es difícil obtener los contenedores.
Areas to get the coffee to move. We're booking through 3PLs. We're trying to get the suppliers to book for us. A lot of different things, but we're facing challenges everywhere in the world with all carriers.
Thank you. And more like some housekeeping information internally for the interpreter to speak a bit, not very fast, so she can translate everything that you're saying, but it's totally fine, no worries at all. Yeah, so kind of looking a bit of this regional scenario that is very, very different compared to what we can find in Latin America, in Africa, as you said, and also, of course, in Southeast Asia. Maybe just kind of looking a bit of a broader picture, Aleksandr, would you say that kind of what happened and what is happening from like COVID onwards as some level of scenario that is going to stay with us for a very long time?
No, absolutely, Lisa. First of all, again, good morning, good evening for everyone. It's really fantastic to be here today, and greetings from Switzerland. I see in the chat we have so many colleagues joining us from around the world and all around from all the time zones. I think this is the absolutely right thing. What unites many of us as supply chain professionals, right, as well, but is the whole challenge, right, of lifting and moving the products around the world. What happened from COVID and onwards, and if this scenario to stay, and again, it's my personal interpretation, right, how I saw it in the ground, right, and how I interpreted it. Yes, right. So simple answer would be it is very likely to stay and continue this way. And the question is only how long. Is it going to improve this year? Well, we know it's not. Is it going to improve next year? Question mark. Is there going to be some relief in 2024? That's possible. But the thing is, we actually have to look also into the technical factors here, right? It's not just, you know, what kind of the situation, but what are really the drivers, right? The capacity of the containers availability is very low, right? And that will continuously persist from year to year, including the capacity of the vessels and the ability of the vessels, right? If you look into the books at the docks in terms of the new vessel constructions, and I mean container vessel constructions, right? So new vessels are not coming earlier than the Q4 2023, I mean, in that capacity. And the most of capacity will hit the market in 2024, and actually to replace some old vessels rather than just to add extra buffer that basically all the industries, especially agri-food, are crying for. Additional factor, you know, which I would like to reflect here is shipping lines, right? They also actually learn how to earn the money, and we also have to be frank, right? They've never been so profitable these days compared, you know, to the past 20 years. So there is certainly now the understanding and leverage of the current situation, right, to improve and increase their profits, right? And that's also certainly that contributes into the shift of the kind of the buying, selling power between the shippers and the logistics operators and the shipping lines, right? On top of that, what additional technical factors are contributing, right? We also have to look at the terminal operations, right? So they can significantly contributing to the queuing in the ports, right? That is not helping to speeding up the logistics. It's not helping actually to speed up the turnaround of the assets, basically containers. So, and that's also from another side where the industry per se, right, is challenged to look into the new ways or into new modes of delivering the coffee, right? Because historically, coffee relied, you know, on the shipping, you know, in the 60 kg bags. Then there was a shift for more big bags, right? But now, for this time, actually, some of the players, you know, learned actually how to operate it in the dry bulk vessels, what was quite untypical and still uncomfortable for some of the prices, for some of the players. But here, again, because of the demand and because of this switch into the dry bulk business, right, their pricing and the cost of freight have also been quite significantly increasing over the past year. So yeah, that's a challenging time, and short term, I have very big doubts that it's going to improve. On top of all the complexities now in China, because of the COVID constraints now, and unfortunately also extra complexities that are coming because of the geopolitical situation in the world.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I think unfortunately this is a bit what we've heard talking with many players that are kind of connected at the moment with the situation and try to understand, you know, how they can cope with the fact that overall there are so many challenges happening at the same time that it's very, very difficult to get a hand of, I mean, the current scenario, but also try to gauge what might be happening in the near future. So yeah, thank you for sharing that. And going to Dawn, I was, of course, kind of representing a roaster, so the next step of the value chain in this case. It would be interesting to understand, for example, based on what Colleen and Alex have just said, if you've seen any shift already when it comes to kind of how roasters have been coping and dealing with these logistic challenges.
Yeah, well, first I just want to say thanks for having me, and it's a joy to get to talk to everyone here. But I would say that one of the most immediate things after the pandemic hit was a shift in channel growth. Like we went from all of our coffee bars closing to like significantly more online orders and having to shift and adapt to that. That was sort of the beginning thing that we had to deal with. And then because of that, what we had sort of planned for what coffees we needed, everything sort of changed. So we started having demand in other, for certain blends that we didn't have demand for previously. And trying to get the coffee back in on time, we ran into, like how Colleen mentioned, with the bigger supply, like retailers like Walmart, Costco, they were taking up the port space. So we were starting to see delays. And because of that, we started implementing tools that we use to maintain our inventory, where we now have like a higher percentage of our inventory, like of inventory on hand for these delays that we can expect in the future. And just like a case for that, like once coffee finally did start coming in, say like last summer after it got through the ports, it arrived to our third-party warehouse where they were so overstocked from other larger retailers stocking up for the holiday season. And so we had to work very closely with our importing partner to figure out a solution around that and move coffee somewhere else to be palletized before bringing it to the warehouse. So I think one of the biggest things that we've done to sort of stay on top of everything has been working as close as possible with our importing partners like Olam to make sure that we're on top of when our coffee will be coming in. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, so unfortunately, as we're seeing, I mean, as we all know already, challenges kind of are all over the place for everybody a bit engaged with anything that has to do with logistics at the moment. And kind of the core idea of this webinar series, when we thought about it, was understanding how and whether technology solutions can be embedded to solve some of these issues. Because I mean, unfortunately, of course, the pandemic was totally unexpected and nobody would have said, this is going to happen in the near future. But aside that, we now know, everybody knows that we are a bit in this world where potentially, uncertainty is here on a daily basis. So is there a way in which potentially we can see how digitalization can get in and help supporting some of that uncertainty? So this is kind of what I wanted to explore a bit more with Colleen, understanding a bit if we're looking at the technology component and kind of potential digitalization of coffee logistic. What would you say is the current situation at the moment? Is technology part of the company businesses? Is this already being used? Is this something that is hopefully going to happen soon? Or yeah, just really curious a bit of what you're seeing.
Okay, and I'll talk slower. I do tend to rattle on. So the technology component, I would say that the logistics sector in general is behind the rest of the world in terms of implementing technology solutions that are helpful and useful in day-to-day. The ocean carriers, for the most part, have the ability to go online and make a booking, go online and track your coffee or your cargo, and to do various functions. They've been slow to come to the table. There were some carriers that were ahead of others. But even now, what's available isn't necessarily always accurate. and isn't necessarily what they're doing. So there are some carriers who have a routing on there. If I say I want to ship coffee from Santos to Oakland, and I go online to a carrier's website and see that they have a vessel and, you know, a schedule. If I look at that schedule and think that doesn't seem right, and I ask my sales rep and they say, yeah, no, we don't offer that lane. So the technology is there. I would say right now in today's market, especially, it's not necessarily accurate. I think there are technologies out there. I mean, there's vessel tracking technology out there that you can see literally where your container is on the ocean on a ship. And I think that the carriers use that technology. There's a website, Intra, where you can see every carrier and plug in your from and to ports, and it'll show you all the carriers who ship on those lanes and what their vessel schedules are. Again, though, that information, when you check it against the carrier's websites or against something else, is not necessarily accurate. So basically, yes, there is technology available to us. And as an importer, it's important for us to keep track of our containers so we can keep our customers aware. But what's out there isn't, first of all, in my opinion, tremendously accurate. And then secondly, it's not available in one place. I have to look in 4 or 5 different websites and piece together information to figure out what's going on.
Para descifrar qué es lo que está ocurriendo y trato de rastrear.
It's just the technology is getting better to be available to us. It's not available to us in a way that makes sense and is easy for us to use. The other part of it is that the ocean, the terminals, you know, if you were to go to Shanghai or to Rotterdam or to other ports in the world that are large ports like Los Angeles is, those ports are far more advanced in terms of the technology and the things that they use there than the ports in the US. The ports in the US have been hampered by the unions, the ILWU in particular, whose contract is up right now. They pushed back against technology for years. So the large container vessels can't call US ports for those reasons. And that puts a strain on things. You can't, you know, those vessels go to Europe because the European ports can handle them. And then the warehouses we use don't use great technology. The warehouses that we use in the US are a little behind the curve on our ability to in real time see information and for them to have good inventory systems that use technology that's not even really new technology. It's technology that's been around for a couple of decades now. But so I'd say things are better than they have been, but I think we need still a solution that integrates everything together so that we have a more succinct place where we can find what we need.
Thank you, Colleen. Yeah, I mean, for what has been my experience in general when it comes to the use of technology in the sector as a whole, not just talking about logistics per se, I've seen a lot of fragmentation, unfortunately. So what happens is that, for example, you have a system that works very well in one step of the value chain, but then when you move to the next one, the system is somehow disconnected from the rest. And then again, you have maybe a very good system working in one step and then disconnected from the next one. So I do believe that this interoperability that we're all talking about is some kind of bit of a gap at the moment that different coffee actors have been feeling. And it's interesting to see how this is also resonating with the logistics aspect in coffee and kind of, I wonder if, I don't know, if we had this conversation again in 3-4 years from now, if something like this would be already better compared to what we're seeing now. So it's definitely some food for thought that we have to kind of think together as an industry to see whether there's an opportunity to be a bit more open when it comes to that interaction. And moving to Alex, I wanted to ask more specifically if perhaps you could provide some maybe examples of alternative solutions for operational efficiency, like understanding a bit how companies could be a bit more proactive when it comes to being able to adapt to these changing conditions that we're seeing on a daily basis with the logistics aspects right now in coffee.
Yeah, that's a good question. And I think one of the points that we're discussing indeed, we have a mix of the tools and solutions that were really 20, 30 years old. And we have solutions that basically just maturing as we speak. But at the same time, exactly because of the silos, or kind of the siloed orientation of the solutions, that sometimes forces most of the businesses still to manage their supply chain in Excel. It's counterintuitive, right? But that's one of the reasons. Might have this system, but I still need to brief, right? To brief the customers what's going on, and basically people are telling this, taking this information, putting it still in the Excel, and sending it to the customers, right? And I see three issues here. So the first one is we are not really capable then using the data, right, to maximize the value, both for our clients and ourselves, right, in terms of the operational efficiencies, finding the new ways how to improve operations, or actually where the problem exists across your supply chain. At the same time, it's easy to say, and also, to complain the fact, yeah, majority is still forced or using the Excels. We also have to be frank that sometimes off-shelf solutions, right, they're just expensive. Because we also need to, we have a big traders who operate in supplying coffee. We have big roasters, right, who basically generating quite significant portion of revenues. And then for sure they can go and implement global solutions and so on. But what to do with the mid-size or niche, small roasters or suppliers, right? How they can benefit basically really from the digital economy. But the good thing is there are solutions, and I would say there is evolution of the solution, or I would say revolution of the solutions, right, that is taking place over the past, I would say, 3 years. I'm personally tracking the logtech startups, right, and it's already around 900 around in the world, and it's amazing what's happening, right, across the whole spectrum. And one of the key drivers there is the software as a service, right? So you don't need anymore to buy complicated package of the software. Right, you actually can find the good, reasonable, subscription-based solutions that can give you first understanding what is really happening on the freight market in terms of the costs, right? Analyzing the spot rates versus long-term contracts. And I think some of you here in the audience know Xeneta, right, which was actually quite useful to monitor the situation across different locations. Even the truth to be said, right, they might not having all the port pairs, right, that you can benchmark against, because maybe you're supplying in the specific locations and they don't have so many data points that can be used by the service provider. But it always can be checked, right? But the shipping lines, and it was a good point what Colleen mentioned, right? The portals that currently exist in the shipping lines, and it's still to be true, some of them trying to improve, that might not give you the right, indeed, and accurate data, which is quite often is important, especially for the clients like roasters, right? So that they can plan their working capital, they can plan their inventories. But that's where also evolution of the new solutions was coming over the past, 4 years, like Ocean Insights example, right? They have developed algorithm that also take the satellite information, weather forecasts, and then using ETA information from the shipping line. But the algorithm is also saying what is their forecast actually when vessel is going to arrive to the specific destination. So it gives you a good buffer that you can maybe pre-inform your customer, right? Say likely there is going to be delay, or you can plan your operations accordingly to make sure that, let's say, you return empty container back to the port on time. There are different other solutions, right? Intra was mentioned, right? It's a part of E2Open platform that now gives basically whole complete end-to-end visibility of the movement across the supply chain, including inland transportation, right? But that's why I'm always cautious here. Technology is absolutely key. It's going to shape, right, the industry. It's going to be needed in all the aspects of the value chain, but it needs to be applied really with a purpose, right? So to make sure that there is no, factor like we say garbage in, garbage out, right? But then basically really things are streamlined and prepared for this system integration. And again, everyone needs to choose the right tools. There was a good comment, right? Indeed, there are a lot of silos, but I think there are also several cloud solutions are existing where you can actually connect those silos through API and then to build this appropriate visibility within your network. That would be kind of the key reflection on that point.
Thank you. Yeah, that's very true. Sometimes I mean, at the end of the day, it's not a matter of just technology for the sake of it, but more understanding, what's the right fit based on who you are as a company and how you can connect with your needs and challenges and make sure that this is useful for you at the end. Because sometimes as technology definitely has a bit of sometimes, it takes a lot of energy and time to making sure that it works. But if you are doing that with the right tool, definitely you can feel like you are going in the right direction. So it makes a total difference for sure. So thank you so much, Alex, for that. And I kind of going again in this journey towards the end of the value chain in this case. I wanted to ask Dawn if you could maybe present a bit from your perspective, so a bit what could be from roasters and retailer perspective, how you envisioning the technology being part of a future of the coffee sector when it comes to the logistics aspect, and really kind of streamlining this information in a more effective way for you.
Yeah, so I think before the pandemic, we just sort of anticipated coffee showing up on time. And since we've had so much volatility from external factors over the last couple of years, it's forced us as a industry to really create tools and try to pay much closer attention to inventory and logistics. And I think moving forward, when things start to normalize, we'll just continue utilizing these tools that we've created out of necessity that will really make the supply chain a lot more efficient and allow us to have a better understanding of our when coffees will arrive and paying closer attention to inventory. And ideally, I would like to see all of the different tools that we're currently using, like the enterprise resource planning or ERP system that we're currently using, that it has multiple ways for us to track our inventory as a company, but it doesn't integrate with our quality control software. So if there was a way that those two were fully connected and integrated, I think that would help to streamline our inventory and logistics. I also think that tools like what Colleen mentioned, sending more regular updates to roasters will just continue to be commonplace. And if we could also have a way to, instead of having segmentation where I have to go to a container tracking software to look up container, if that was also just all in one with the quality control software, everything was just integrated into one system, would be where I think the industry will be going.
Thank you. Yeah, so we are actually very well with timing today. I would probably recommend all the participants in the audience to drop your questions in the Q&A. So since we have quite a nice time of Q&A, we can have some nice interaction with all the speakers, and then we can also kind of answer any of your doubts that you might have at the moment. So I will start with Tom. I will read this out loud, and then if any of you want to take it, you can also maybe, feel free to do so. This person asked, I'm curious how the influx of craft brands in the US and Europe has affected logistics at origin. As green volumes shift from large manufacturers to local regional roasters, are shipment quantities, contracts being affected?
Well, I guess as an importer, I can answer. We do, we import for a lot of companies who do micro lots, if that's what Tom is asking. So we do ship, a full, it might be a container of 200 bags rather than a full 275 or 320. And it'll have 10 bags of one kind of coffee and 20 bags of another kind of coffee and so on. It doesn't present much a challenge for us on the front end from the supply side, other than we need them to give us a solid packing list to tell us what's coming. But on the destination side, when it gets to the US, the challenges we have are what I mentioned previously, which is the warehouse piece of it, because getting a container into a warehouse where you've got a mixed container that's got maybe 10 or 20 different kinds of coffee in it, is challenging for the warehouse to differentiate and make sure that they really stay separate so that they don't mistakenly give, because a lot of times it's just a small variation on a theme, right? It'll be this farmer versus this farmer or whatever the case may be. So we do a lot of those kinds of containers, the micro lots and the small lots from co-ops. You know, it has its own challenges, not really on the front end of the logistics side, but more on the side when it gets to us in the US.
Sure. I just want to add on what Colleen also mentioning on the European side as well. So I think, well, indeed, still many companies not able to operate in the Amazon way, right? And the main reason is indeed is a lack of technology, basically, and ability to handle, you know, less as a pallet business compared basically to big supplies. But the same topic is also connected actually to the question from Edith, right? Because Edith is also asking basically if there is any solution available for small roaster to source at the region and neutralize their orders and shipping fees. Edith, so and Elisa, you might correct me, right? I just don't remember the name, right? But I think if I remember right, there's already emergence of the marketplaces that are helping actually to pool the volumes between the small roasters at the specific region. And that actually includes also the logistics factor into it. And then it basically goes to the destination. That is, maybe you can sound some names because I forgot that, but I had something in mind.
Yeah, so that's right. I mean, normally these platforms are more connected with the concept of traceability, I would say, or are more well known because somehow there is this tracking component that can go just in connection with the chain of custody, or perhaps is more connected also with the pricing point and other aspects of kind of the details of the kind of purchase that the buyers is doing. But definitely then normally most of the times the platforms work together in tandem with like logistic partners. So they do offer support to kind of make sure that, but they're not, I mean, of course, at the end of the day, the key is partnerships is always key in terms of understanding how the solution works, because of course the technology can provide total connection in terms of like tracking the different steps of the value chain. But at the same time, when it comes to the physical coffee being moved, then they always have like a strong support with, of course, like companies that can do that. And some of those names could be, I don't know, Grano, for example, Farmer Connect, Baco. Maybe these are some of the platforms that Alex.
And they're on top, but we can follow up with you if you know. Drop a note, Lisa. There have been also a few names which allowed small roasters to go as a marketplace to source coffee from specific region and to utilize basically joint buying power, including the freight. So we just follow up. I also need just to remember those names, but it's a good question.
So I wanted to ask Dawn if maybe you wanted to touch on or answer any of these two questions, or.
Yeah, I'll just say like for the first question on the roaster end, because we do full container shipments as well as smaller micro lots, and there's always a delay with, it takes about 3 weeks longer for us to get a coffee that would have to be sort of broken apart at the port warehouse, and maybe we have like only 20 bags coming over on a truck rather than just having a full floor loaded container coming to our warehouse. So there's some delays there, but I think like maybe Alex, the companies you mentioned, like in the US we have Royal Coffee has their Crown Jewels program where you can buy much smaller lots. I think Cafe Imports has a similar program to that, where smaller roasters could buy like much smaller chops of spot purchases.
Yeah, and I also would like to pick up on the question from Christy, right? Regarding, so the point is struggling to source food grade containers across multiple region countries, right? And if we are aware of the new container production. So there are a few shipping lines like CMA and a couple of others. They submitted in Hapag, if I remember right, they placed the orders end of the last year for quite a big lots. I don't remember the number by heart, right? But unfortunately, I don't know what are the situation split of those orders between the normal and the food grade containers. But normally what happens, right, it's actually a normal container being transformed into the food grade container. The problem is that sometimes the shipping lines are not very efficient in doing that, and it's not possible to do it all the terminals as well, right? But again, food grade containers were always the issue, and this problem likely to stay, right, in overall context, basically. And indeed, if the shipping line to prioritize, should they convert some of the containers into the food grade containers, right, or they should ship, you know, high-end electronic products, right? That for sure they will prioritize those high-value goods rather than the agri-food products. But maybe something will change soon, right? Because again, because of the geopolitical situation that we have now and the lack of the different food resources, right? So that might change because of the pressure that might be coming from the different international organizations, right? But yeah, Christy, it's hard to answer the question if it's going to be really, really better.
Thank you, Alex. You're helping me with the kind of scrolling through the questions. This is very helpful.
Just connecting.
Exactly. I don't know if perhaps Colleen, you wanted, I know it's also part of, maybe you wanted to, I didn't want to put you on the spot, but in case, feel free to, of course, add to what Alex was saying.
No, I agree. I mean, I think it's the same with building the ships, right? I think that by the time they realize that there's an issue and they say, oh my gosh, we need more ships, or, you know, right now with the new CO2 emission standards that are coming into play at the beginning of next year, they need more efficient ships and better ships. But by the time everyone realizes that and they say, okay, you know, they're making record profits right now, so let's build some ships. Well, you don't build a ship in 6 months, you build a ship in several years. So as you know, Alex said in the beginning, maybe 2024 is when we'll see some more ships come online. But at that point, they're also going to be retiring some of the older ships that don't meet the CO2 emission standards, which is going to be about a third of the fleet that's currently on the water. So it's the same with containers. By the time they realize that they're having issues with the containers, there's not a lot of steel available in the world to build the containers. You know, the manufacturing to do it, you know, it's like, I would rather build widgets and sell them to somebody for a lot of money, or there's so many components that come into play there that it's not necessarily a huge a push. And for the carriers, you know, I mean, they're making their money and they're doing what they do. And I agree with the food grade aspect of it. You know, if it's a season for food, I think they probably do their best to make available as many food grade products, if it's, say, cherry season from the US or something. But as an overall part of their business, consumer goods that are not food grade are a much larger part of their business. So it's not, I don't think, a huge priority for them to make food grade containers more readily available to all of us, unfortunately. So it's a tough one. And that goes for trucks in the US as well. Domestic trucking is the same thing. We're more and more running into issues with getting trucks to go to warehouses to pick up coffee, and the trucks that show up are not suitable for picking up a food grade product. And, you know, we've had to turn away more trucks in the last 2 or 3 months from warehouses than I've ever seen in recent years. So I think across the board, the transportation providers are so booked that there's not a huge incentive for them to cater to a specific industry that's a food grade industry right now.
That's a good point. And I think, you know, where there is a need, there's always, you know, the new startups may be coming with the great ideas, right? And then will be shaped. No, it's really because, let's say, I know one of the startups here in Switzerland, they realized actually why not to make container out of the composite materials, right? What makes the form lighter, right? And then for sure they, you know, sensorized everything what was possible. It just got recently certified. But that's already a good start, right? Because let's say, first of all, it decreases the weight of the box. You need to have less metal basically used, right? And so on. But we need these disruptors, right? Really to kind of like shape a bit the status quo and challenges, right? And challenges that we are facing as different industries, because it's not problems only in the coffee life. It's a challenge in many other areas.
Thank you. I was actually looking, there were some questions here and there in the chat, and Geronimo was asking something connected to this regarding if organizations like NCA, according to you, are advocating with the shipping sector to accept coffee as a commodity of importance, since coffee is not considered a high value commodity. So I don't know if you know about the advocacy piece here and if this is something that is happening at the moment.
I don't know of anything that the NCA is doing. I don't know if anybody else does.
Well, let's say in Europe, I know there have been the discussions because of the European Coffee Association, right, in conversations, but I think the notion of the free market, basically, right, limits the ability, the governmental ability maybe to influence, at least the point of view currently that exists within Europe, right? So if there is a lobby, if there is even escalation, right? So currently the countries are not really kind of enforcing any specific measures on the shipping line, but still kind of respecting principle of the free economy principle, right? But even it's hurting basically obviously the shippers and the buyers. So on that side, let's say on the European side, I don't think there are really many things happening or can happen at this moment.
Thank you. Okay. I'm trying to put together questions, but I don't know if I'm able to. So let's go from the first one. So somebody is asking if how do shipping brokers and contracts versus spot bookings complicate the current logistics problems? And I don't know who wants to take this, but also maybe Dawn, feel free to jump in if you like.
I'll just say, like, on our end, I think it's definitely more efficient to book ahead of time with contracts, because you can get even before you have like your pre-shipment samples or anything like that, you can have your importer book a container. So what we've been doing to get ahead of like logistical problems and delays is sending contracts with a like no approval, no sale memo on it, just saying like, for our importer, please book the container ahead of time. We know that we're going to buy, but that's part of our direct trade model, that we're going to purchase from like set countries. We already have an idea of how many containers we're going to purchase ahead of time. It's just about filling those containers with the lots that we choose based off of approvals. So being able to book the containers ahead of time is definitely helpful, compared to, as a roaster, purchasing from the spot market is a little bit different, because that's coffee that's already, like in my case, in the United States. So you're paying a premium over that, but you're not planning, 6 months ahead of time. So there's of course cost benefits to planning ahead and trying to forecast your demand compared to going with the spot market.
Thank you. All right, so then we have Brianna. Hi, Brianna, nice to have you here with us. That says, we can see so many improvements in supply chain efficiency and traceability with interoperable tools that can integrate the fragmented data across multiple platforms. Some companies see their APIs as proprietary. How do we support a more collaborative and open environment for the betterment of all? PS Crop Connects can help with that.
I think this is the technology. Alex, I was gonna say, can speak to this because it's the technology piece, right? It's somebody to put it all together.
Well, yeah, I think there are several elements, right, to that. There is and it links always to the conversation of traceability, right? My humble opinion, currently there is no any off-shelf solution, let's say, that would allow you end-to-end traceability. And what I mean, from the specific farmer to the retail, right? It's possible only having the umbrella solution that integrates indeed through APIs different systems that exist within the spectrum, or integrates like a super system, right? And it integrates different subsystems, so that basically from user experience, you're still dealing with the same one tool, right? But behind this tool, right, there will be still a mix and hybrid integration of different layers of APIs, sensors, right, and in other data sources. And the issue here it's a good question, right? Talking about the interoperable tools. The problem is also when you look into your own supply chain as own enterprise, even within your own intra part of your supply chain, you're not of an efficiency because you don't even have your digital warehouse, right? So you're not able to, let's say, trace, or you're not tracing it up to the single bag, the coffee that comes in or goes out, right? I mean, when it goes through the processing, right, it's packed, then it goes to the vessel, then you can associate this batch with the container, right? And so there are so many things that really should be done. I certainly agree it's not really good, right, where API is considered maybe proprietary, but again, there are a lot of substitutes, right? And again, also, I think here is the open source community is also helping, right? There is quite a big movement to helping with some solutions specific within the supply chain and value chain. But yeah, just someone needs to get, and help those companies really to make a sense out of it and to do it, this integration in the way that, again, makes sense for this specific business and their customers.
Thank you, Alex. Yeah, I didn't want to put you on the spot, but you were definitely the right person for this one. So we have, I think, a last question. If somebody in the audience has a final thoughts and question, you can always add. I mean, we have a bit more time extra, so feel free to do that. So Sandesh, hopefully I'm pronouncing your name correctly. I hope so. Is asking, is the logistics issues affecting the differential pricing of different coffee origins, in your opinion? And anybody that wants to take it, of course.
I do not buy the coffee, so I don't know about the differential price. Don may be able to speak to that more. I don't know, but I do know that for us right now, the end user price, the selling price to the customers, we're having to look at different pricing because, as an example, if we had bought a coffee based on shipping it from origin to Oakland to put it in our warehouse in Oakland and then sell it to our customers, but we end up having to bring that container in via Houston and then truck it from Houston to Oakland. The ocean freight differential between shipping to Houston and shipping to Oakland is about maybe $300, right? But if we have to ship it to Houston and then truck it up to Oakland, the trucking alone is going to be about $4,500, not to mention the handling into the warehouse and all of the other things we pay to truck it to the port and everything else. So on the buyer side of things, we're having to look at pricing. On the origin side, I don't know if any of this is affecting the differential pricing to suppliers because I do not buy the coffee.
Yeah, I can't really speak on the differentials either because at Intelligentsia we have like a fixed pricing model, so we kind of just ignore anything going on with the C market, and we have our set pricing. So, but I will say, similar to what Colleen said, that there's definitely like an adjustment in the freight costs depending on which origin the coffee is coming from, and that's something that we do pay close attention to. But I guess I'll just go to Tom's follow-up question about, are the roasters increasingly buying direct from origin, or do they need to reach a certain level of scale before that direct model makes sense? I would say, I guess, generally speaking, that the ideal, like the most efficient way would be being like when you're at the size that you can have like a full container load. But that being said, I think there is a lot of importers that will bring in a full container load and then split it up to different, like Olam, where they could split it up to different smaller roasters. So they're kind of the intermediary on your behalf. If you're a smaller roaster, you could go to an importer for sure.
Yeah, we do a lot of direct trade. So we have a lot of customers who share a container. So we'll have, like I talked about with the micro lots, we'll have a container that comes in that's got coffee for a number of customers. And, we'll do origin trips as an example, and they'll all go and meet farmers and, you want to buy from this guy and that guy wants to buy from that guy. So we do a lot of that. I think for your own purposes, to buy direct from origin and import into the country, I think it's easier said than done because there's a lot involved in terms of customs and other things like that a lot of people don't really take into account when they, we get a lot of people who go to an origin and say, oh my gosh, I want to buy this coffee, I'm going to bring it into the US. and then, you know, the reality of actually shipping something and getting into to the US, and especially in today's market, is not what you envision. So we do a lot of that kind of thing, the direct trade micro lots for a lot of different small customers, because I mean, we'll sell you one bag of coffee. I mean, we sell to anybody who buys one bag of coffee to somebody who buys the full container. So it's we do that kind of business.
So Colleen, if you want to then include your email in the chat, you can also get connected, of course. Okay, I see another couple of questions. Since we have the time, I guess maybe we could take those. So somebody, more questions. I mean, let's see how much we can do. So I will read this out loud. It's a bit long, but just so you have context, and also the audience has context. So one aspect that I don't hear talked about much is long-term contracts between imports or shipping brokers for better rates on various shipping lines. We've heard of bookings under these contracts being rejected as prices for shipping have been going up in the last few years to force spot booking of shipping slots. What kind of terms are usual in these contracts?
Okay, so now it's clear. The question is clear. Well, I can reflect, you know, over the past few years what was going on, and you're absolutely right. Even having the contract with the shipping line, it gave you no guarantee basically that it's going to be covered by the capacity, right? And even in my experience before joining Cognizant, it was the same problem, right? So the long-term contracts were not respected, and we as a consequence were forced basically to go and take on the spot market, right? And the spot market difference between the contracted price was really significant. And why the problem was always the fight about the locations, right? So what are the locations you have in the contract, and if you especially want to go above the locations, forget it, right? So it's very true. And the same challenge was for the brokers. Actually, the brokers been also more challenged sometimes to get the containers, even we try to go through them, because you know, shipping lines were even sometimes resisting to work with some of the brokers, and they basically prioritized direct client relationships in discussions. But I don't know how things changed over the past 8-9 months, right? But it was certainly the fact, right, that if you wanted to get the container, it was only getting to the spot market, and the contractual relationships were not basically helping you in cases. But it was not only the case for agri-food sector. It's when I talked to my friends in the consumer goods and so on, it was a challenge everywhere. So major also multinational companies been struggling, and the contracts were basically kind of not respected.
Right. Thank you so much for that. There is a nice question in the chat regarding quality control that I think this is something that we haven't touched on. Dan is asking, from a quality control standpoint, shipping delays are causing coffees to sit for extended periods at humid hub ports. Are there any restrictions from putting humidity moisture tracking devices in containers? Any of those new tracking companies getting traction?
Yeah, I think, well, first of all, there's no restrictions, right? It's more there is a restriction on the hardware side, let's say how much data and how frequently you want the device to send to you, because then it becomes the question of the connectivity, right? So all through the satellites mostly, right? So there are a lot of the solutions, right? It's enough to Google that. It's more the question, what kind of the parameters, what kind of connectivity, how frequently you want the data to be sent to you. Right, that's basically the basic questions you need to answer. Then you go in work. The main problem often becomes those device providers, they don't necessarily have the platform, right? That actually would show you, would have, you know, geomap, right? That would consolidate everything in dashboards and so on. Some do, some don't. So that's where you might make the trade-off, right? So if you want basically to integrate with some of other systems through APIs and etc. But otherwise, there are no constraints. I think you heard as well, Hapag-Lloyd just announced that all their containers will be equipped with sensors. So they are now doing this conversion. I think they're also going to, for sure, ask the premium for this, like a subscription-based, to going into the subscription-based economy, right? What, again, makes sense. And so that's again proves, right? So there is no issue of having the sensor inside. It's more, is there a value of that? How you'll use the data? How frequent do you want to monitor the data? I remember I even had some conversations with insurance companies, because also was the idea, let's say, right, so if we're using the sensor that monitor condition, right, of the product, can we reduce the premium, right? So for the marine insurance. So, but again, this is the also topics that's not maybe so just on the hardware piece. I think there are a lot of things that should be discussed on ecosystem level, right? And it's also where this collaboration of the roasters, the regions, different NGOs, you know, the shipping lines, logistics service providers is quite necessary. And again, Lisa, also thanks a lot, you know, for all your activities, you know, bringing all those stakeholders together. So yeah, Dan, I would say here you just can Google that, right? There is no issue with the device. There is no issue. It's just more what kind of the criteria you will set, what your expectations will be, that, and how it fits basically your overall needs.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I think we could wrap it up because with a final question from Chrissy, if you have maybe 30 seconds each that you want to. Chrissy is asking if there's any way in which there is an opportunity to have news updates from what is happening with regards to delays from origin. Like, is there any maybe platform that informs about these things? Is there any way that allows for better monitoring and maybe have more like open projections? Or is this something that each person should do with the single trader that they're working with, potentially? I don't know if, yeah.
I would say, you know, for finding out things about what's going on in the shipping industry or logistics, I mean, the Journal of Commerce is a website, and they also have a hard copy magazine that they put out, but they'll give you information about, you know, what's going on with the longshoreman's contract, what's going on with ocean shipping, what's going on with ocean carrier mergers, domestic trucking, all of those things. That's a good source. There's a few others, I'm sure, that are, you know, online. You can look at the shipping news and things like that to find out. I would say, you know, as you said earlier in the discussion, you know, it's the geopolitical situation in the world is, you know, just look around. I mean, you know, in the US right now, there's this big thing where infant formula can't be found in the US. And that's part and parcel of what we're talking about here. So I think your importer should be a good source for that information. I know that we are being more proactive about communicating with our customers about where their coffee is and what we can do to get it where it needs to go. Unfortunately, that is something that we don't totally control, because if we have a container sitting in Panama that's been sitting in Panama for 2 weeks, all we can do is ask the carrier when it's going to finally move and hope that they answer us and give us information that's valid, because there isn't currently any kind of a mechanism or a platform where we can go and look and get accurate information that's going to give us, you know, forward-looking information about anything. So I would say, you know, it's not a bad idea to do something if you're an importer, or if you're a roaster who's importing coffees, to go to logistics websites and look at that and get some information there.
Thank you.
I just add what I personally do is I'll use Google News, and it has a search bar, and I'll search for the local news at whatever port that I'm looking at. So like I'll search like Newark, New Jersey news and see maybe there might be something more there that's not being said on the national level of like what's going on with freight. So you can get a better insight of what you might expect for delays coming up.
Thank you. Well, this has been it's been very nice. Thank you so much for all the questions from the audience. We do have a few more, but of course, if you're interested, if you have any specific question after the webinar, you can always reach out to us as Digital Coffee Future, and we can make sure to maybe facilitate a direct connection with the speaker that might be able to answer to that question. So once again, thank you so much to Don, Colleen, and Alex for their time and expertise during the session. Make sure that you can also join us in 2 weeks on June 2nd, where we will be kind of deep diving into different case studies of technology being used for logistic purposes, try to understand more specifically what are the options there and what's available at the moment. And yeah, again, a big thank you to our sponsors today, Crop Connect, Savor Brands, Coffee Friend and Merkin, and our media partners, Roast Magazine and Barista Magazine. Enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.
Thank you.